I don't really like the name 13ers when referring to Gen X, but I hate using just Gen X. I hate using Gen any letter just to describe a generation. Like, you gotta be known for something. Maybe like latchkeys, because that's like the thing y'all are most proud of. It's being latchkey kids, and it did have its advantages. Having little aversion to risk is one of them. Now, your generation's not unique. It's unique around all the other generations you've lived with. Unless you really got to know the old people when you were young, who were the lost generation. They were starting to die out almost entirely when I was like a little kid. My grandparents lived in a retirement park, like those little mobile home parks, but for old people. And you did have a few lost generation people there. As I was saying, though, your generation's not really unique in the wide spectrum of things. Other people have gone through what you've gone through, other generations. Like, most notably, I believe it was the kids who were a part of the Civil War cycle. Every Halloween, a number of those kids would end up dead. Like, a decent number, too, because they were playing, like, really dangerous games and shit. And then maybe you think, like, you're the most hated generation ever, but the Cavaliers were the subjects of the Salem witch trials. The Lost Generation fought in a world war. And, I mean, if you look at how the GIs were treated when they fought a world war, and even how the baby boomers were treated, the Lost had it the worst. The Lost were basically like, you know what, y'all are a problem. We need to ban alcohol. And Prohibition started. And these are called nomad generations, according to Strauss and Howe. Now, a lot of you go off what a Pew Research Institute says. They don't really have a basis of why they're naming the years that these generations are. The latest Strauss and Howe have put it, 13ers are 1961 to 1981. And a generation is roughly 18 years long. I mean, not 18, 20 years long. It's around 20 years. Could be less, could be more. There's a possibility that they're getting longer, though most people think they're getting shorter, but that's just looking at cultural differences, which you compare someone 5 years after you, there's going to be plenty of cultural differences. Take millennials, for example. Like, a lot of people say, like, people born after 1990 are much weaker than those born before 1990. And I can kind of see why, because you see the youth suicide rate climbing back up. Gen X had the second highest. Zoomers have the highest currently. But what's going on is where that argument's kind of dumb, because where it ends is that you're basically saying it's cooler to be a fentanyl addict than it is to commit suicide. That's where that argument goes. Now, another cool thing about nomads is they are excellent parents. I mean, yeah, they kind of are overprotective of their children. I mean, I see, like, a lot of these Zoomers, they grew up like, oh, stay on that tablet, and parents secretly monitoring what those kids are doing. And, you know, they're kind of growing up in fortresses. That's not to say there are no latchkeys. That's another myth, that, like, the latchkeys disappeared after the 13er generation became adults. That's not true. It slowly declined, very slowly, in fact. There was one study done, it was on the news, but basically went around interviewing homeless people, doing a survey. This was in the mid-2010s. 1 in 3 of them were under the age of 18. So yes, there are runaways, throwaways, and latchkeys, even as millennials, and some even Zoomers. Recently, I did see a video of some guy who was kicked out of his home on his 18th birthday. I've seen a few things like that. It's not everywhere, but it's much less now than it was. And it's kind of like the bad things you do as a generation are going to get the most attention. A lot of people look at Chicago and think Zoomers are doing all this crime. That's very localized. And if you look at a typical Zoomer, they're not committing any crime, and the numbers really support that. 13ers, on the other hand, yeah, youth crime was a problem. One guy said it best: y'all either got incarcerated or joined the military. That's pretty much where that goes. Now, you were the first generation that became legal to kill before you were even born. You were the first generation that people took pills to not have. And a lot of people try to debate because they want to be labeled as a 13er because you all are so cool. They want to try to smash that year up past 1981. But the thing is, that's where the rising adults, that section of life, that's where they would spend most of their years in the unraveling, as whatever. Anyways, think about it this way. Movies like The Omen and Rosemary's Baby would have flopped in the 1980s. But they didn't in the times that they were released. Children of Corn was one of those same movies that hated kids, painted them as these evil creatures, but that flopped in the 80s, 1984. I don't know when, someone let me know in the comments, when did you start seeing it's 10 p.m., do you know where your kids are on the TV? That's a pretty big moment of, hey, let's start caring about these kids. You had that episode of Full House where Uncle Jesse acknowledges child abuse. You had the episode of Different Strokes, the bike shop one, where they acknowledge pedophilia. So yes, if you were born in 1982 and after, sorry, Home Skillet, you're a millennial.